Two whistleblowers who worked for a drug company called Questcor say that the company bribed doctors to prescribe their dangerously overpriced anti-seizure medication after they raised the price by nearly 100,000%. I have Farron Cousins from the Trial Lawyer magazine with me now to explain what's happening. You know, when you hear you hear these stories from time to time, and then you say, no, that really can't be. The drug company didn't raise that 50,000%. This is 100,000% that they raised the price of this drug. It's called Acthar. That's one. Acthar is the one we're talking about. Right. And it started off to where it goes from like, it goes from $40 to $39,000 per prescription.
Right, for a small vial of this drug that is primarily used actually to prevent seizures in infants.
Yes.
You know, I mean, we're talking about newborn children having seizures, and this company, Questcor, said, you know what's better than $40? What if we're making $39,000 per vial? And this story, to me, has every single piece that is wrong with Big Pharma wrapped into one. You've got the price hike of 97,000%, the bribing of doctors, the off-label marketing of this, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but this story is every ugly piece.
Let's break that down a little bit, though, okay? First of all, you talk about the off-label. Off-label means that the drug comes onto the market for a specific purpose, okay? It may be very narrow. And then the company says, well, we can't make enough money by selling it for that narrow purpose, so we're going to make up other things we can sell it for. This particular drug, for example, was sold for a whole host of things that have not even been clinically proven to be efficacious. You understand? They tell the doctor, Doc, we think it can be used for this. The doctor then uses for that. And the doctors, they rarely say, well, what do the clinicals show? Show me what the clinical data shows, because the truth is the clinical data showed that this product was not even efficacious for other things like MS and rheumatoid arthritis and some other things that it was used for. This is like this is the worst of the worst. I mean, this if you were to encapsulate everything that's wrong with the drug industry and everything that's wrong with government, for letting them get away with this. Understand, this whistleblower brought this case 7 years ago, all right? It sat around in the Department of Justice, and the truth is the Department of Justice, unless it is a home run, unless it's low-hanging fruit, and you can basically hand a victory to the government, they won't touch a case like this. So somebody says, well, you know, this sounds pretty bad. Maybe we can actually win this one. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, and the reason they want to take it is because they can get a lot of money off it, too. We're talking billions of dollars they can recover from this drug company, Questcor, which is now Mallinckrodt. But the reason the DOJ is even involved in this, and the reason the whistleblowers came forward, is not because this company was ripping off consumers. They also ended up, I guess, inadvertently ripping off the federal government in form of Medicaid and Medicare payments, the overcharging, the price hike. Had it just been consumers, the government wouldn't care. The government wouldn't get involved because that happens every single day. But when they find out, oh, well, you unfairly raised the price, you unfairly were using this in off-label, convincing doctors, bribing them, according to the whistleblowers, to prescribe more of it. And we saw the prescriptions increase with doctors who got your money or your golf junkets or your speaking gigs. Then it's a problem.
Yeah, well, Questcor took it to a whole new level. Questcor actually set out, they said doctors kind of understood that it was a medication that really wasn't a good medication. It really didn't work. It wasn't really something that was going to help MS or even rheumatoid. So what they did is they would then go about bribing the office worker, the person who sets the appointment. And so they actually, so what they did is they got them for kickbacks, not just to doctors, but to office workers. Yeah. They got them for money laundering. They got them for fraud in misrepresentation of this. And most importantly, they got them for stealing billions of dollars from the American government. I mean, that's what happened here. This company went from marginal kind of profit to where it was making more than $1 billion a year with this scam, Questcor.
Absolutely. And to me, that just really shows how desperate some of these pharmaceutical companies are going to get. They know they've got a not so great product, not as good as the competitors. So when you get to the point where you essentially have to bribe the receptionist to even allow your phone call to come in, when you have to bribe the person making the schedule to even let you get through that door to talk to the doctor under false pretenses, something is wrong. But Questcor is not, they're not the only company that does this. We see this too often.
Yeah, I mean, every now and then you'll have a company that tells the story like this because this is 100,000% markup on a drug that basically is not even a good drug. Basically, doctors would even choose not to use it. So they end up really, really pushing all this towards taxpayers. Taxpayers end up footing this bill. But Farron, it's bothersome to me in so many ways. This was brought 7 years ago, before the Department of Justice says, yeah, maybe we ought to do something about this. They've had all this information for 7 years. Right. And they said, well, we can't really do anything because maybe we can't show that it's actually a bribe. And, at some point, a prosecutor for the Department of Justice has to man up. And they have to say, yeah, we can do it. It's a tough case, but we're trial lawyers. Let's do our job. Unfortunately, that's not how this went. Understand, this went through what? So 2 presidencies, right? Yeah. The entire time Eric Holder was in office, he did nothing about it. Then you have, Attorney General Sessions, he does nothing about it. And so all it does is perpetuates crime. It just perpetuates crime. And I don't know how we really change that. Unfortunately, you are right. They weren't looking out for consumers here. Right. They were looking out for the federal government.
Yeah, if the government hadn't been part of the scam would still be going on. And 7 years, to give people perspective, this happened before Obama was even re-elected.
Yeah.
That's how long the DOJ had these documents and these files locked away under seal.
And did nothing about it.
Until finally, I think it was a month or two ago, it was unsealed.
Yeah. Well, it's Happy Meal time at McDonald's. McDonald's Corporation is feeling the heat after workers file more lawsuits over charges of condoning sexual harassment, complaints to OSHA about workplace violence, on and on. I have legal journalist Molly Barrows with the Trial Lawyer magazine to follow the story. Molly, this is almost as bad as Wells Fargo.
Yes.
Pick up a paper on any day, and you're going to see that Wells Fargo has done another bad thing. Whether it's taking too much from a credit card or making up fake accounts. It seems to be in the food industry, McDonald's is the equivalent of Wells Fargo. What's your take?
Yes, they're in the crosshairs for several different organizations. So last week was an especially bad week for the Happy Meal maker. I can't imagine they were too happy with last week. More than 24 lawsuits and regulatory charges were filed against the corporation. There was also another complaint that was filed with OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, that says that they're allowing workplace violence. So that they're not doing enough to protect employees, I should say, from workplace violence. So that particular complaint was brought by a store in Chicago. And of course, McDonald's is based in Chicago. And they're basically saying they had all this interesting information about when crimes were being committed against employees, the types of problems that they were facing.
Okay, so tell me, what is the corporate? What's McDonald's saying? Like, sorry, we got it wrong. We'll make a better hamburger. Buy our. I mean, what are they saying? I mean, at some point, here's the point. At some point, once this starts stacking up, it kind of is a pile-on.
I think that's what's happening.
And people start looking. Next thing will be the $15 fight. Yeah, that's what we're going to see next.
That's
right?
this labor group that's actually involved in both of these particular issues, whether it's sexual harassment in the workplace that McDonald's is condoning, they say, or it's the fair wage issue, or it's this workplace safety, doing more to help protect employees and implementing policies. So essentially, McDonald's reaction to both of those is, well, these are franchises. We have long maintained that we're not directly responsible for these franchises. But some of these advocates for these other issues are saying, well, you guys hold your franchisees hold their feet to the fire when it comes to business practices and marketing and accounting. So why can't you implement better training and more safety policies?
Here's what people don't understand about McDonald's. McDonald's doesn't really make their money on selling hamburgers. McDonald's Corporation makes their money on leasing the property to people who are the franchise holders. That's where the real money comes in. When this whole thing was put together, they decided, yeah, we can make a great milkshake and we can probably compete with Burger King and all the other folks. But where they really make their money is the money that franchise pays out to them for the property, the leased property. And because of that, McDonald's is one of the biggest property owners in America.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, they're a giant landlord
Yeah,
of
they
hamburgers.
really are. They're more of a giant landlord than they are. And if you've eaten a McDonald's hamburger lately,
Yes.
you kind of get that we hope they're better landlords than they are chefs.
Yeah, well, that's true. Well, and I guess what's interesting to me is that you have the ACLU, the Me Too movement, Fight for 15, which is that labor group that's, involved in all those issues, plus the low pay cause. And then Fight for 15 is also involved in the a complaint against OSHA, against McDonald's. And this has been like part of a year-long effort of just, or confrontation, if you will, between McDonald's and Fight for 15 alone. And then the past 3 years, McDonald's has had all of these, lawsuits. And like you said, every time you turn on the news, they're either being involved with some sort of protest. People walked out last week out of 20 different restaurants.
Here's what
to
people
protest.
forget. It all flows from the top. It's like Wells Fargo, okay? Wells Fargo is always, they're always apologizing. Well, don't apologize, get new leadership. And when you get new leadership, things change from the bottom. The person that hires at the very top affects everything below. And so sometimes a corporation actually reflects that personality at the top.
Well, do you think this is like a Walmart situation where Walmart became like the poster child for we're not giving our employees health insurance and look at all the money they're making, and it's almost like they're trying to do the same thing with McDonald's?
I think exactly the things happening. It's almost like Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, they're they deserve it, don't get me wrong. They're awful folks.
They're iconic.
They're iconic for bad conduct, yeah. Molly, thank you for joining
Thanks,
me.
Fab.
This is an important message for our nation's veterans. If you served our country in the military between 2003 and 2015 and you suffered significant hearing loss, you might be entitled to compensation. Because the hearing protection you were issued may be at fault for the damage you suffered, but you need to act now. Your time to make a claim might be limited. Learn more at levinlaw.com/earplugs.